This is part 2. Video ran out, so I will continue on. We're talking about the obelisks and its association with the centre of the Earth and the human brain, centre of the human brain. So check out video 1 first, otherwise you won't have a clue what I'm talking about. So we're just talking about the pineal gland and how it's tuned as an antenna. Excuse me. So your brain is tuned to the Earth's higher frequencies once the water has been released from around the pineal gland. And what sits higher up in the firmament? The sun, Christ, or God, whatever you wish to call it. And the S1 granite is all about frequencies, all carved out of a single piece of stone. And what's that thing we have in the centre of our brain? It's called the pineal gland. It's like a little stone. It all refers back to that. Stone. So that was off the top of my head with my knowledge. So I go and look for a picture, start looking on the internet for obelisks and information, and what pops up straight away? Exactly what I was referring to. I've never seen this before, but there it is. I tried to blow the picture up, but it might be hard to see, but you'll see this is the obelisk at that fountain in Rome I just mentioned earlier in the other video. The fountain of 4 rivers in Piazza Navona, Rome. And can you see the snake winding up? The spiral, the vortex wrapped around the staff, and what's written on the spiral, that's exactly how I pictured the constellations would work. And there it is, right on my face, right on your face now. The obelisks, representing the centre of the flat earth. And this is how the constellations work. As the sun winds up in the season, it's winding up, and it's getting the constellations as it goes up. Remember, the sun moves up from perigee, December solstice, all the way up to the June solstice, is it? In the north, summer. And it moves like this as it moves around the flat earth, projecting its light. Well, it's not actually light, it's frequencies. It only becomes light thanks to our eyes, which our black pupils are tuned to the black hole of creation. We've all come out of the black hole of creation, and it's all right back there in the centre. Imagine it's the centre of Earth in there. We've all come out of the centre. In the centre of a vortex is a state of inertia, where it's still, there's no movement. This is Earth is. Earth is a state of inertia. It does not move. It's still. Not the sun turns. Earth is dead flat. And at the very centre of it is the vortex that turns, that creates life, because the sun is there. The sun has created the life. We all exist due to the sun. As it turns, we all move. It moves, the sun moves, everything else moves. All life moves thanks to the sun, because it's moving the magnetic field. We're all creatures of light. It's all to do with frequencies, vibrating atoms. Well, that was off the top of my head. Then I go to another site. Just 1 second. I thought someone was coming in. So I go to the site, and what do we have? The name. You've written all that. Symbolism of the obelisk. The obelisks of ancient Egypt represented the Ben. Well, I've already mentioned that. Ben stone. The primordial mound upon which the god Atum stood at the creation of the world. It all began from the centre. This is man's awakening begins from the centre of his brain, the pineal gland region, and flat round earth began from the centre and it grew out. As much they were associated with the benben bird, Egyptian precursor to the Greek phoenix. According to some Egyptian myths, the Bennu bird was the first living creature whose cry awoke creation and set life in motion. The bird was linked to the morning star and the renewal of each day, but was also the sign of the end of the world. In the same way the bird had cried to begin the creative cycle, she would sound again to signal its completion. Now, the Bennu bird is like a stork, so that's associated with you could associate it with Jack and the Beanstalk, because you have to climb the stalk to get to the tree of life to eat the fruit, the forbidden fruit. But there's a lot more to it, and I've done previous videos and all that. The Egyptians believed the day would come when the gods would die and all would return to the uniformity of primordial chaos. Yes, this is if we destroy Earth. Basically, it gets flushed away in another flood before it will renew again. The benben bird would not choose this, and the Bennu bird would not choose this end of its own, but would be given its cue by the sun god Ra, who in turn would have been informed by the god Thoth, keeper of the records of human and gods. The Bennu bird was primarily linked, however, with Ra. Ra's the sun. Later Amun and Amun-Ra, and with light and life. Egyptologist Geraldine Pinch comments on this. From the pyramid texts onward, the Bennu bird was closely associated with the creator sun god in Heliopolis, the centre of solar worship. The Bennu bird was said to perch on the benben stone, a kind of primitive obelisk, or on the branches of a sacred willow tree. When Egyptian kings had reigned for 30 years, they asked the Bennu bird to renew their strength and vitality. While keeping this association with the Bennu bird, the obelisk came to be increasingly associated with Ra and solar worship, especially from the New Kingdom onwards. Obelisks were always raised in pairs, in keeping with the Egyptian value of balance and harmony. It was believed that the two on earth were reflected by two in the heavens, as above so below. See, Egyptologist Richard A. Wilkinson writes, the phenomenon of duality, dual system of man, pervades Egyptian culture and is at the heart of the Egyptian concept of the universe itself. But rather than focusing on the essential differences between the two parts of a given pair, Egyptians thought may stress their complementary nature as a way of expressing the essential unity of existence. So he's bringing the duality into singularity. This is all through meditation and stuff. Through the alignment and harmonization of opposites, just as we today might use men and women, old and young, or great and small, to mean all or everyone. The jewel obelisks were raised in honour of a great king. It's all about the man who awakens, and they knew it was coming when you get a full solar eclipse. Or in the case of Hatshepsut, a great queen, but also served to honour the gods, or more often a specific god. In the period of the New Kingdom, the obelisk was thought to be inhabited by the spirit of the god it was raised for, in the same way a god was thought to actually live in his or her temple. Thutmose III of the new kingdom instituted the ritual of offering ceremonies to obelisks in the same way that offerings were brought to temples. And this practice continued through the Ptolemaic period, blah blah blah, the last to rule Egypt before it was annexed by Rome. The pharaohs of the new kingdom erected more obelisks than any other in the belief that they would live on through these monuments. This is about the immortal, eternal life thing, see? It's all associated with that when you wake up. Monuments as offerings would continue to be brought to them after their death. So as the physical world dies, physical life dies, they don't die. Their memory's not obliterated like the average person who's just reincarnated into something else to do it all over again till he actually does wake up. The obelisk then represented the living deity, the vitality and immortality of the pharaoh, the one who's been brought out of a dark place, remember, and the concept of duality and balance. No matter who or what else they commemorated, though, they were raised and carefully positioned so that the first and last light of day would touch their peaks to honour the sun god. It's all about the sun. These divine events happen thanks to the celestial bodies, the sun, and solar eclipse with the moon, and the third entity, Mercury or some other alignment. The sun god was thought to enter on a perilous journey at night, where he would have to navigate his barge through the underworld and avoid destruction by the great serpent Apophis, which that's another, and that the Greek story is Typhus, and that's going back to what I said in the earlier video, the Milky Way, nighttime. The sun is battling the nighttime. The sun goes into the underworld at night and comes back out again. That's what all those mythological stories are about. The Egyptians performed ceremonies to ward off and weaken Apophis and keep the sun god safe, and in this way they took part in the cycle of day and night. See, this is the Greek one, is Zeus and Typhus. They battle it out, but the sun always wins. Zeus wins. Obelisks served to honour the sun god, and he rose from the night in the morning, crossed the sky and disappeared back into darkness at evening. On a practical level, the obelisk would have them served as a sundial, in that the journey of Ra across the sky would have been indicated by the movement of the shadow of the monument, except when the sun was directly overhead and no shadow would be cast. Construction and placement. The largest obelisk ever created was never raised in so-called unfinished obelisk of the pharaoh Hatshepsut, 1479-1458 BCE, which still rests where it was abandoned at the quarry of Aswan. That's what I'm telling you. It's all there for a purpose, a meaning. It's not just what you think. If you don't awaken it, it'll stay dead and buried, abandoned. You have to awaken yourself. The meaning to life. The site regularly used for quarrying stone of such monuments. This Aswan, where all the red granite came, rose granite came from, and shipped hundreds of miles to places, so they say. The unfinished obelisk is thought to have been commissioned for placement at Karnak. But this is all make believe, see, that these people have no idea, where Hatshepsut had already raised the monument known today as the Lateran obelisk, which was moved to Rome in the 4th century CE by Constantius II. The unfinished obelisk measures approximately the work on the monument abandoned when it cracked while being... Yeah, see, they're just making all this up. Workers began carving an obelisk out of the granite bedrock at Aswan using chisels. Well, it's about it. The rest goes into man's own interpretation and make-believe. What have we got here? Evidence as one indicates that to remove the stone, the masons probably chiseled, more make-believe. Down here we have, when the pillar was carved to satisfaction, ropes were slung around it, more make-believe. It's just their version. What else have we got? Okay. More make-believe. The quarrying, transport, that's all man make-believe. Obelisks and temples were frequently positioned in the courtyards of temples. It's in the centre, isn't it? Centre of the earth, centre of the human brain, to honour the God within, because that's our holy place up there. That's our Jerusalem in there. And this whole thing is the King Solomon's temple, the layout, as well as the sun god who would sail overhead. The only obelisk still standing in its original position is that of Sennacherib, at the site of a former temple to the sun god at Heliopolis. Other obelisks were removed by foreign nations or given as gifts to countries by the Egyptian government. See, way back then they all knew their significance. They knew their divine significance. The so-called Illuminati. They're the ones that go and invade all these countries, steal all their goods, take what they want. Oh, we'll get into that later with the when we start talking more about the GPS and the celestial navigation and all the ancient information that NASA has, and it comes through the church. It's all buried. Everything you want to know is all buried underneath the Vatican, all hidden from us. A symbolic orientation and placement can perhaps be most easily seen in the Egyptian temple, where it was employed constantly at both the macro and micro level. Many temples were located on sacred sites or built close enough to the Nile to be partially submerged during the river's annual flooding, thus symbolic of the water recreation of the world. Excuse me. It's the flood story, and exposing the pineal gland, bringing the water away from it. Those with their third eyes open full time, have a pineal gland exposed. It's not sitting in fluid like the average guy. And you remember my earlier videos I mentioned the sarcophagus in the bottom, way down below the Great Pyramid, sitting in water. So it represents the same thing, representing the tabernacle. I mentioned Holy Grail. I didn't mean Holy Grail, it was the tabernacle, the centre, the holy place. And anything lined with gold is referring to your spiritual connection, very divine. And all this associated with meditation and those other cultures and religions. India, Chinese, they know about that sort of stuff. Most temples were aligned, at least theoretically, with the daily passage of the sun. This alignment is seen in the positioning of the horizon, like pylons, towering obelisks, and solar discs painted along the architraves of the temples east to west. So the obelisk connected to the positioning of the pyramids, and I'll do that in another video. But I'll need the board up to draw that on the board for people to see. But that was very interesting, how the constellations spiral up the centre, and there it is right there. And they've mentioned the 4 rivers, so they know the whole divine story. It's all kept as a big secret, all fudged. Everybody goes off to church and listens to some crazy interpretation, which is way off track from actual reality. It's sort of mixed with the make-believe and wants you to think of all this stuff. And this is why you get the atheists thinking all these guys are daft in La La Land. But the true story lies in the middle here. And it's not being told. And it's all to do with the meaning to life. And it's all in the centre of the brain. And it all matches the centre of creation. The black hole, the centre of Earth, the whole story. That's all I'll say today. Thanks for listening.